Welcome to a special edition of the CK Podcast here on the Basketball Zone Cowbell Kingdom YouTube channel. Election day has passed us, my brother Ty. How you doing? How was it for you? I'm sure it was your first time.
Yeah, no, second time.
Oh,
Second.
second time.
But yeah, super excited, man. Election day technically over, but we still don't know the
Yeah.
results. But with that being said, man, there's been a lot going on with the NBA, a lot of new topics going on. So I'm glad to talk about it, and let's see what's going on with the NBA draft.
Pretty much we'll be focusing on NBA Draft Net. Their latest mock draft has some interesting picks. We'll discuss yes or no if we agree with their picks from 1 to 14. We'll also talk about briefly of Woj and Zach Lowe breaking down that today's NBA Board of Governors and Players Association are holding separate meetings to potentially start the new NBA season on December 22nd, which is 3 days before Christmas. Hey, the Kings may finally get a Christmas game, man. That's on the bright side, man. That's how I feel about that. And then Bobby Marks kind of talked about what an 18% escrow would look like for some of the top earners, and we'll go over briefly. Steph Curry is scheduled to make $43 million. With this escrow, he'd be making 35.3, which is a 7.4 million cut. A lot of people may be thinking, oh my gosh, that's not the end of the world. But when you really think about it, if that was you in that situation, I'd be pretty hurt losing $7 million. So
Yeah.
let's not act like it's a big deal because it is. And then LeBron James would go from 39.2 to 32.2, which is again $7 million. Kawhi Leonard from 34.4 to 28.2, which is $6.2 million. So the more you make, the more you lose. We understand that. And then the total escrow for all players would be $720 million to $800 million. So that's a big drastic drop off right there. So what are your initial thoughts on this season restarting or starting, sorry, on December 22nd?
Yeah, so as an NBA fan, I'm all for it, right? Let's get
Yep.
some NBA action going. Let's see my Kings make the playoffs,
Uh
baby.
oh. Oh, hot take alert.
Yeah, on a I guess a more conservative note, it's kind of difficult because you feel for the players, right? They're
Right.
losing out on money, and especially the guys that made it deep in the NBA bubble, like they get absolutely no break. It's almost like they're being penalized for making it to the championship and things like that. Especially with the escrow, man, it's pretty crazy. Just like you said, mentioning the numbers, like players are losing $7 million, and I get it. It's Steph Curry and LeBron James, but $7 million. Do
Right.
you have $7 million on
Exactly.
hand?
No.
That's crazy, man. But I understand it though, because from the NBA's perspective, and I know the whole Daryl Morey thing with China, we lost out on a lot of money,
two
a
hundred million
lot of
dollars
money.
to be exact.
Yeah,
So they
there was,
lost 200 million. They've lost almost $1 billion by pretty much having that bubble and everything that happened throughout those 4 months of the break. Like all this has really hurt the league, and I believe if my numbers aren't incorrect, they would at least not lose an additional 500 million if they start on this day. And as we all know, whatever the owners make, the players obviously have to ask for that amount. And if they're not making that money off box ticket score, hey, off box tickets, hey, guess what? The players make less money. So obviously, this meeting is very important. And low key, they kind of need this to start on that day because the more you delay it, the less they make. So it's really important. But let's go over the mock draft that NBA draft.net has as their most recent one. And we'll kind of go over it from 1 to 14. So on the first one, Minnesota has Anthony Edwards going number one. Do you agree or disagree with that?
he's arguably one of the best prospects for me in this draft because it's not very talent driven. I would go for the best player, not necessarily best fit. So you obviously know I'm a big LaMelo Ball
Yeah,
fan at one, but it's understandable.
1,000% agree with that. I believe Anthony Edwards could be the most talented because of his size, the way he shoots the ball. Not from a percentage standpoint, but from his mechanics. I feel like it's going to translate to the NBA level very soon. His gifts athletically, his strength. He reminds me a lot of Mitch Richmond, but with more athleticism. So I definitely see his potential, his upside. And it makes sense because if you draft LaMelo, that'd be, again, the second ball brother that kicks out D'Lo out of his position. I don't see them doing it because they gave up so much to have D'Lo in the first place, and it makes more of a fit stamp, more of a better fit with Anthony Edwards. So I think that's pretty accurate. Now, number two is where it gets tricky. I'm Denny's biggest fan, like legit, and I know from a national perspective, a lot of people love to hate on white Europeans. Why do I say that? Because I see it all over comments. If Denny gets attention, a lot of people get upset. Like, oh, you should be paying attention to this guy, that guy. Like, Denny's a nobody. But I'm like, well, with that ideology, with that perspective, if Denny's a nobody, then that means LaMelo and Anthony Edwards are nobody too because they haven't proven anything either. So let's not use this reverse racism tactic because I believe that's a big thing when it comes to Euro sports. They undermine their skills, their talent overall, and it bugs me. It bugs me because they won't ever want to give him credit. And we saw all those naysayers with Luka Doncic. I was like, if you close your eyes and you just see this player on a stat sheet and you apply all his skill sets without knowing what that player is, black or white, you would say, oh my God, like this player is potentially the number one pick. But because when you saw white European, your mind automatically triggers, all the busts that we've seen go very high. But with that type of logic, I could say, well, I can see all these 7 footers be busts as well because we've seen so many black big men not pan out or just black players in general not pan out. I just hate when people have to criticize or look at a prospect because of the skin of their color. I hate it. I despise it. Judge that prospect for his skill set. No more, no less. That's how I like to judge all my prospects, and that's just how I do it. So with Denny Advia going number two, he'd be the perfect fit if they decide to keep this pick. You put him next to the Splash Brothers at 6'9". He can play and make from his position. He's a beautiful fit, man. So I can see that, but I would say the consensus nationally would not agree with that.
Yeah. I think I'm probably leaning more towards the general consensus just based on the fact that, when you hear European basketball player, I think the first thought that comes to mind for me is fundamental, right? These guys play basketball the right way. I think even before Kobe passed, he mentioned, if he was raising his own son for himself, he would send him to Europe just because, they play basketball the right way. Now, I've watched a lot of film on Denny, and yeah, he's a very smart basketball player. He gets to the spots that he needs to, has good vision. But for me, I don't know if he would fit necessarily perfectly with the Golden State Warriors. I understand his size. Definitely, he can't be undermined, 6'9", lanky. So, definitely like, small things like tipping the ball on passes and things like that. But for me, I think it's hard for just young players in general to immediately make an impact on like a championship or even, a playoff contention team. And so it's very rare that you see someone like Tyler Hero, right, where he's playing, dominant minutes in, the NBA Finals. And so for Denny, I think it might also be difficult. I know a lot of people have been citing this about Giannis is that, when you grow up in the U.S. and that's kind of you're just a U.S. talent, you
Right.
just kind of like, used to the American basketball. And it is a little bit different overseas. Don't get me wrong. You can even argue that it's even more difficult just because of its more system, right? It's a lot more system driven as opposed to, ball dominant
It's
players
definitely
like.
more difficult, like way more difficult, because you're playing against grown men and professionals that played in the NBA, like
Yeah.
Omri Caspi's of the world. So he's played with these type of players already. The same with Luca. I mean, Luca was an MVP amongst these really good basketball players. Danny hasn't reached that level yet, but a lot of it too is because his coach was reluctant to really play him. And after the pandemic, after they came back from that break, he really, really exploded onto the scene. And that's more or so the version that we're going to see at the NBA level.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from, and I think I just saw on ESPN they were talking about James Wiseman saying no to Minnesota, not saying he wanted to go number one, just because he is a marquee basketball player, and that he feels like his ceiling's going to be his ceiling's going to be stunted in Minnesota playing behind a Carl Anthony Towns,
Yeah.
being third option. So for Denny, I think it'd be better for him to go to a system in which he can grow and his expectations aren't as high. So if he's not averaging as many points per game, there's not that much pressure on him as opposed to like the Golden State market, where if he's not hitting shots from Steph Curry or Klay Thompson, then he's looking as a bust.
Well, I think that's the perfect fit because of what you just said, that he's going to have a lot of open shots because he's going to play off of the great players. Now, if you put him into something like the Kings, the T-Wolves, any of the bad teams, I think, contrary to what you just said, they'll look at him as a bust because he won't be like that superstar talent. Now, on the Warriors, there's less pressure. I guess it's all perspective, right? There's less pressure, but there's more pressure because you're on the good team. But then there's less pressure because you won't be the focal point, so that means you'll have more options, more opportunities to score easier shots. It's all perspective. I get both ways. Let's go to number 3. Charlotte has Onyekwa going at 3, which is again very surprising from a national consensus standpoint. I love this kid. I love his defensive tenacity. I love his little hook shot that he has around the rim, and he's improved so much from his Chino Hill days. I can see that happening, honestly, but I believe Charlotte, if they have the option between Onyekwa and Wiseman, I believe they'll go Wiseman just because of the physical attributes. But I won't be mad if they go Onyekwa because Onyekwa could potentially be better than him.
Yeah, we talked about this before. When I hear Onyeka, I hear touch. I mean, this guy has crazy touch around the rim. He's able to, finish little hook shot, little floaters, and I've even mentioned it before. If a big can, hit a nice little mid-range jumper, then he's ahead of like 50% of big men in the NBA. So for me, I definitely see Onyeka being a great player in the NBA and being able to adapt immediately. But especially at 3, I don't know if I'm taking him over Wiseman or LaMelo, just based off the fact that he did play at USC, was very productive there. But for me, I don't know if he's going to be as much as an impact player. And I think with them and having Terry Rozier and Devontae Graham, I'm not super high on them being the faces of the future. So LaMelo could fit there. And then just like you mentioned, when it comes to the James Wiseman versus Onyeka debate, for me, I think James Wiseman definitely lost a lot of stock because of his suspension. So, in my opinion, if we have gotten to see a whole college season out of James Wiseman, I think he would be potentially the presumptive number 1 pick. But because of that, I can see why his draft stock has dropped. Now we're going to talk about later why he's all the way at 11. But yeah, I mean, I would prefer LaMelo or James Wiseman there, but I do love Onyeka.
Okay, number 4, LaMelo Ball going to Chicago Bulls. Do you agree or disagree?
I mean, for any of these last 4 teams, I would have loved for any of them to take LaMelo, but in that Chicago market, and I guess at this point, if you take LaMelo at 4, it's a throwaway to Kobe White, right? I mean,
Yep,
what? Yeah, and so you'd have a team of LaMelo, Zach LaVine, Wendell Carter, Lauri
that's
Markkinen. I
nice.
mean, I could see it, dude. LaMelo being the new face of Chicago, they haven't had that type of superstar power since MVP Rose in 2012. So I mean, I love it, man. I think he can play alongside those guys. I think it might be a little bit difficult in terms of scoring wise, side by side with Zach LaVine because he's a scoring guard. But I mean, it's LaMelo Ball, man. I think he has good court vision. He can make it work, and regardless if he's scoring or not, he's able to make an impact on the game.
So if they go in that direction, this just popped into my head. If you're the new GM for the Kings, Monte McNair, and you're seeing this situation develop with Chicago saying, you know what, I'm going to go after LaMelo Ball, make him my point guard, not necessarily the face of the franchise, but my point guard, but I have Kobe White. If you're the Kings, do you offer number 12 for Kobe White straight up?
Ooh, that's
Ooh, that's nice. That should be like the question of the show.
Yeah, that is a good question.
Yeah.
Because at 12, we're obviously going to talk about this later, but, what options do we really have? We have Kyra Lewis, Aaron
So
Neesmith
so
as
it
some
so
deep
it
picks.
it, it kind of comes down to, do you like Kobe White more than Kyra Lewis, right?
Yeah. Um, I don't know, man. For me, I played a little bit of fantasy basketball, and so I was able to, monitor some of his stats. And
Yeah.
so for him, he was just inconsistent. There'd be weeks where, he's having good scoring games and being able to, distribute the ball, and then there'd be weeks where he's averaging like 6 points a game, 8 points a game. So I'm just like, what's going on with him? Obviously, he's a young guy, and so I think he did do pretty well in college. But yeah, that is interesting at 12. Where did he go last year? 8,
7 or 8, something like
7?
that.
I mean, considering he had 1 year in the league,
Yeah.
mean, I wouldn't hate it. It's just I'm big on Kyra Lewis, man. I see De'Aaron Fox
Me
2.0, and
too,
so if he
bro.
falls to 12, I would really like Kyra Lewis.
Yeah, that's super interesting for sure. But yeah, I think I would lean towards Kyra Lewis just because of his upside and what he could potentially be. Again, I'm not saying I'm not dogging what's his name from the Bulls,
Kobe
but
White.
Kobe White. But damn, Kyra Lewis, I like the idea of bringing him off the bench, right? Playing those Kojo minutes because let's be honest, Kojo isn't a true point guard. He is a shooting guard who likes to play defense and a point guard's body. That's what he is. And that's why it didn't work between him and Buddy Hield coming off the bench or just them playing together all year because of injuries. That was the worst pairing we could have had for the Kings because their games are just so different and they don't complement each other. And that's what I keep trying to tell people. So if you add a guy like a Kyle Lewis who can apply pressure, who can supplement Fox's up tempo, his speed, it's like you'll never give that defense a break. And that's a beautiful thing to really think about because they'll always be in transition if they finally decide to play to the strength, which is what? Playing up tempo basketball. So that's very interesting to me. Would you guys trade number 12 for Kobe White? Let us know in the comments below. So at number 5, Cleveland would be taking Obi Toppin. Agree or disagree?
I would probably just say agree. I mean, technically, I guess they could go James Wiseman at this point if he's still on the board, considering I don't see a long-term future with Andre Drummond there. But I'm not opposed to it. Obi Toppin at for Cleveland right there. I thought it was kind of weird how in past years what Darius Garland and Colin Sexton. So I think that's a backcourt they need to figure out. I think that they're bought in on Kevin Porter. I don't know, but at this point, just like I've mentioned before, especially at this draft, where outside of the top three, you don't really know what you're going to be expecting. You got to take the best player. And I think Obi Toppin, he's definitely gotten the comparisons to Amari Stoudemire.
Yep.
So hopefully he's going to be able to make an impact on that team immediately. So yeah, I'm not opposed to Cleveland taking Obi Toppin.
I like Obi Toppin, his offensive versatility, but where he concerns me, obviously, what everybody knows is his defensive prowess. He could be like a young Marvin Bagley, where he's lost defensively, and that could be a no-no. But at the same time, if he's put into the right situation, like if Golden State would draft him, and you would have lineups where Draymond Green is out there with him with the 4 and the 5, that'd be pretty scary, honestly. So it just depends where he goes. If he goes to Cleveland, that'd be probably the worst thing that could happen to him.
Yeah.
So again, you're a product of your environment. Uh, if you're Cleveland, you have to draft him. But if you're Obi Toppin, you're like, oh man, I'm going to Cleveland. Super cold. We know as Raider fans, they had to play in the snow this past weekend in Cleveland. Wasn't the best, but they got the job done.
I think what's interesting also with that Cleveland team is what they're going to end up doing with Kevin Love and Andre Drummond, right? If they're
Yep.
able to unload those contracts to championship contenders and maybe get some young assets back, like I've heard that the Celtics had some interest in Andre Drummond, so if they're able to snag a Carson Edwards, Romeo
Yep.
Langford over there, and they might have a nice young nucleus. I don't know what's going on with Kevin Love. I mean, he's in Cleveland, he's not in Cleveland.
Yep.
I don't know, but hopefully they can build something in Cleveland again post LeBron era.
I agree. Atlanta at number 6, they're saying they would take Killian Hayes. Agree or disagree?
So is he just coming off the bench because he's not taking Trey Young's spot, right? And so they must see him as only a backup
Best player
reserve.
available right there, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like if you're gonna spend such a high pick for someone that is just gonna be a backup to your superstar, you know what I mean? I would love to see them take a shooting guard, maybe even like a Devin Vassell type guy at this point. But
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Killian Hayes, he does have size, 6'5", born in the States. But been playing overseas, so he's a little bit different in terms of he's not just like a strict overseas player, so he's kind of familiar with the U.S. basketball. But for me, I don't know if that pick makes sense for Atlanta. I saw in a lot of mock drafts Killian Hayes falling a little bit, but what's your thoughts on that, Leo?
Correction. Killian Hayes is French. So he wasn't born in the
Yeah, he was
States.
born in the U.S. Born in the U.S. and then
Right. Okay.
yeah,
Um, you're right with your point on him not, you know, playing in terms of a fit. He's best at a point guard. When I interviewed him during maybe like a month ago when we had these scrums via Zoom, he said it himself. I'm best at a point guard position. Can I play shooting guard position? Sure, I'm big enough to do it, but I'm most comfortable, just like LaMelo Ball. Both of them, because they have size, they can play the two guard. The thing is, they're most comfortable at the point guard. And as you said, it wouldn't make sense drafting him, even though he's best player available, over a guy like your star and Trae Young. So drafting a guy like Devin Vaselle would make more sense, and I think he'd be the right fit there. And that's a pick where they're trying to win games now, and they have a lot of cap flexibility, so they're shopping that pick. Now, if you're the Kings, do you draft? Sorry, do you call and say, "I'll offer you Buddy Hield for the number 6 pick"?
Ooh. I mean, if we're looking at that NBA draft board in terms of what would fit for us, I mean, who's really left available that, really opens the Kings' eyes? I mean, Patrick Williams, Tyrese Halliburton, like
Isaac,
these
I mean,
guys.
at that point, if it goes by these draft picks, it'd be Isaac Okoro. He'd be like really and James Wiseman if you want to go in that direction, but he'd be really the only guy that you'd kind of move up because if Denny's available at 6, then you make that trade. But if he's not, then you're right. Like at 6, you're kind of taking some guys that you could potentially take at 12.
Yeah.
Um,
So
you're
are we
right.
trading? Are we trading our 12th pick too, Buddy, and our 12th to Atlanta, or would it just
Yes,
be Buddy?
it'd just be Buddy.
Yeah. I mean, that'd be interesting if we keep our 12. I mean, I wouldn't be mad at like Isaac Okoro and Kyra Lewis. I mean, that's pretty interesting. But then
Okay.
again, our shooting guard. I mean, do you move Isaac Okoro to shooting guard, even though I think he's like a true wing, right? So that's interesting in
So
itself.
then that would mean that they would obviously have to match any offer for Bogey. So they'd
Yeah.
start Bogey and Fox, Lewis off the bench, and then you'd have your guy of the future, your starting 3 right there.
Yeah.
Do they make that move? That's interesting, right?
Yeah. For sure.
So we both disagree that the Hawks would be silly if they drafted Killian Hayes. Them drafting Killian Hayes would say is telling me, okay, Detroit, I want to trade you Killian Hayes and get assets out of you because they know that the Pistons want Killian Hayes.
Yeah.
So that's something that, like, who was it that year where the Niners drafted someone's guy and then they got way more assets for like was it Trubisky? It's
I don't
one of
know
those
who's
like one up moves where you know the other team wants this player and you draft them anyway, and then
was
you
that was that the year we got Solomon Thomas, but we kept him though.
I
I don't
forget what
know.
year it was, but it's a year where a team was like, I know you want this guy, so I'm gonna draft him and I'm gonna make you pay for it. So that's something that Atlanta could potentially do. Patrick Williams going at 7 on this draft board is ridiculous to me. Even though he has a high ceiling, the Pistons should not take him. They have to go point guard, and you have some options: Kyra Lewis, Tyrese Halliburton. I think you go Kyra Lewis, but I wouldn't be mad at Halliburton either. So, do you
Yeah.
agree or disagree with Patrick Williams going at 7?
I'm on the same boat as you. I'm Patrick Williams has a high ceiling, but for me, I think I see a lot of these guys come out of college really big athletic wings. I mean, he's able to hit a couple spot up jumpers, but for me, I didn't really see too much out of his film in terms of him being able to contribute immediately. Obviously, if you go to an organization like Detroit, they're not going to be winning immediately. But yeah, just like you mentioned, I would love to see them go point guard here as opposed to Patrick Williams because although he did have a solid season last year, for me, I think it's going to take some time for him to grow and be a developed NBA player. Especially is he listed as a small forward or is he like an official power forward?
He's listed as both. So, small
Yeah,
forward, power forward. To me, he's a power forward in the NBA.
yeah, like a 6'8" power forward.
Yeah.
So at that point, you're only able to do so much. Do you see Detroit matching any offer for Christian Wood, or is he an unrestricted free agent?
Is he unrestricted? I believe he's restricted. I
Yeah,
believe he's
so-
restricted. But if he's unrestricted, I mean, he could leave. And the Knicks have become front runners for him because they're out there saying that they're going to go after him. And that's interesting because they have a young guy over there in Mitchell Robinson. So we'll see what happens there. And that's a player that if I'm the Kings, I'm looking at. And if they want a second round pick in return, I would do it. The Kings have three of them. Now I'm not saying
Trade all of them.
yeah,
Trade all the second round
yeah,
picks,
like
man.
I would trade all my second round picks for him. Real talk. But that's something to really keep your eye on out, and especially if they go after him, after Christian Wood, because he's gonna cost roughly from 9 to 15 million, somewhere in that ballpark per season. So on this mock draft, we have the Knicks going after Tyrese Halliburton, which makes sense. They need a point guard. To me, he would be great with the Warriors. So if the Warriors can somehow trade back and get assets, and then the Warriors can get anywhere from 8 to 10, then Tyrese would be a perfect Sean Livingston type player off the bench. See, that's where you draft smart and you're drafting a good basketball player. But for the Knicks, I would draft Kyra Lewis based on just upside.
Yeah. I feel like Kyra Lewis is a better prospect than Tyrese Halliburton, even though he's ahead in a lot of mock drafts. And so watching film, I don't know. I'm not sold on Tyrese Halliburton as a draft prospect, but when just like you mentioned, when you put him in a system like Golden State where he's not asked to do too much, kind of like a Sean Livingston role, I can definitely see him excelling. But for me, yeah, I don't really love Tyrese Halliburton as a draft prospect. I mean, he kind of seems more like a score first guard for me and a lot of just like flat footed 3 point shots. And so for me, I feel like as a point guard, you have to be if you're going to be a scoring point guard, you have to be able to distribute as well. And so I don't know. I feel like he didn't play a lot of great teams at Iowa State, so I mean that could be why his draft stock's higher. But yeah, then again, I just feel like Kyra Lewis is a better point guard. But if you are Golden State and you trade back, I would not be opposed to Tyrese Halliburton.
Okay, so we got Devin Vaselle next going to the Washington Wizards. That makes sense. Vassell could go there. He can go higher. He can go lower. He's one of these low key players who are really good. He's a sophomore, and he has a size. He has the shooting touch. He's your typical, in theory, 3 and D guy, and every team needs a lot of those guys, right? So going to Washington makes a lot of sense to me. I know someone in the comment section, our boy Charlie, is asking, what do I think about Jalen Harris from Nevada? I know he was bad shooting off screens on catch and shoots, but he's pretty solid everywhere else. 1,000% agree. Jalen Harris, who went to my alma mater at Nevada, hell of a basketball player, 6'4", 6'5", tweener guard, can play the point, can play a shooting guard. He's going to be your perfect guy off the bench that can solidify the second unit. He'll get you buckets, but he'll also play make for you and set up his guys in the right situation. So he's a guy that if he's there with your first, second round pick, I'm snatching him because he's a good basketball player. A lot like the Twins that went to the Hornets from Nevada. I know there's a lot of interest in them league wide because they're really good basketball players. And when you're 6'7" and can play 3 and D and are extremely versatile, you're always gonna have a place in the NBA. And for the good teams like the Heat, like the Raptors, like these great development programs, they love these type of players. We've seen what these type of franchises can do with these type of players. So I would love for the Kings to go after Jalen Harris, like love in the second round if he falls, but I could see him going late first as well. So Vassell going to Washington. Then they got the Suns going after Isaac Accoral. Accoral drafting to 10 is a blessing in disguise for the Suns. I don't see that happening, but I think that's a win-win for the Suns, right?
Yeah, I think just to kind of go back on Devin Vaselle, for me, he's just a good basketball player. And watching his film, it was hard for me to really find a player comparison for him because he just does a bunch of
Yeah.
different things. So I think for him, he has one of the highest ceilings, in my opinion, in the draft. But he also has one of like the like most potential to like fail in my opinion because he just has that wide range. But in terms of Isaac Okoro, in my opinion, he is my favorite small forward in this NBA draft. I
Okay.
think when you watch him play, he's aggressive attacking the rim. He's able to hit open shots, and especially at Auburn, man, I just saw him be able to be a playmaker. When you see a guy be able to fly off the screen like that, make athletic plays, it makes you want to draft a guy like that. But in addition, I saw a lot of fundamental plays that he was able to make, whether it was screen and rolls, making the right pass or hitting the open jump shot. So yeah, I think 10 is an absolute steal for Isaac Okoro. I know in a lot of other NBA mock drafts they have him at 5, and as a Kings fan, man, I would love to have him replace Harrison Barnes if he's available. And yeah, if he is available at like 9, 10, I would not be opposed to trading up to get him as a Sacramento Kings fan.
Yeah, and Charlie and Edward are pointing out in the comment section that Vassell kind of changed his shot, which looks awkward now. And
Oh, I did hear about that.
so I know that his shot looked pretty clean to me, but I haven't had a chance to see his new looking jump shot. And if it is awkward, I just hope it's not like Markelle Fultz type awkward, man. Because if it goes in that direction, he's screwed.
Leo, I'm telling you, man. Look up after this show. Look up his new jumper. It looks funky. It looks
Really?
funky.
Uh,
Yeah,
uh,
it's weird because I don't know why. I don't know. Maybe his trainer thinks he won't be able to get it off in the league, but it does look pretty funky, man. So I don't know.
And it's very important to see how shots come out of someone's hands, obviously. And are you a one motion shooter or a two motion shooter? Like for me, I'm a one motion shooter. I can get on my shot against anybody because it's so fast. But say, for example, a guy like a Jimmy Fredette who had one of the cleanest jump shots from a mechanical standpoint, but it was so slow to develop. And when you're 6'1", 6'2", 6'3", he's not 6'3", but he's like 6'2". When you're six
Yeah.
two and not that athletic, it's hard to get up a shot that's a two motion shot in the NBA. And we saw that that was one of the biggest reasons why he failed at the NBA level. And in college, you can get away with that. But if your shot's not a one motion shot and you're undersized, you're in trouble. But now with Vassell, even though it was kind of slowish to some point, he's still 6'6", so he wouldn't have any issues getting that shot off. So that's why I'm surprised that he's changed his shot. So I definitely got to look into that. At number 11, they have the Spurs taking James Wiseman, which again, that would be crazy if he fell to number 11 and the Spurs get a hold of him. God diggity, like you'd be looking at a new Tim Duncan potentially
Yeah, I see Tim Duncan, maybe even David Robinson, right? This James Wiseman's
to
build.
the Spurs with this build. Like that's crazy,
And their developmental team, right?
right?
The Spurs have been known for being able to get late draft lottery picks and making them superstars. And so for me, I'm just so curious on what NBADraft.net made James Wiseman fall so low. For me, just like I mentioned before, I honestly think that he's a better prospect than Onyeka, not by much,
Yeah.
but I do think that his size and versatility does show that, and just his overall aggressiveness. But yeah, I would love to see San Antonio pick up James Wiseman and develop him into a star, and just like you said, potential Tim Duncan, David Robinson 2.0.
And then Charlie is saying that people also think he did the video on purpose to go to a better team later in the draft. That's just a rumor, though. Huh? A little bit of tampering there, huh?
Leo, watch the video after this show. You're gonna see it looks wonky.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, people are sleeping on Wiseman's defensive upside. He gets a bad rap for it, but you can't teach his size, man. If he can just stay down like many big men at early ages, if he can be disciplined like a Rashawn Holmes, he's gonna be a monster because all he has to do is literally put your hands up straight up and he's gonna be a presence for a long, long time. He's very agile for his size. Again, if he goes to the Spurs, bro, oh my gosh, watch out, NBA. So at number 12, they have the Kings taking Bay, who a lot of people love. He's so solid from Villanova. He shot above 44% from beyond the arc. And he's a guy that if you're trying to win now, then you take in a heartbeat. I've always been the person who says, I don't care if a guy went to college his junior and senior year. If he's a good basketball player and you believe he's going to help you win and he's more prepared than all these upside guys, then you take him now. And at number 12, that is the perfect spot to take a guy like him because he's going to help you contribute to winning basketball. And as a Kings fan, that's all you can really ask for because you are in starvation for wins and he's going to help you get there, right?
Yeah, no, I actually was doing a lot of research last night on Sadiq Bey and just watching his film. And yeah, he's a very polished basketball player. The only thing that concerns me is just guys that come from schools like Gonzaga and Villanova, where, it's a lot more system, right? These are guys that, stay there 3 or 4 years. So as opposed to, players that go to Kentucky, they're NBA ready, even sometimes out of high school, right? So what I'm worried about with Sadiq Bey is, if he's not put into the right system. I mean, I have my reservations about Luke Walton, but that's a different story.
So you're
You know,
saying if they put him in a bad system, or right now the Kings are a bad organization, so you're concerned that if he goes to a bad team, unlike like the Villanova, like Josh Hart and all these guys have gone to better situations, so they've looked better. So you're saying if he goes to a bad team like the Kings, he may not pan out, right?
he may potentially not pan out. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's fair. I mean, it's hard to argue that because the Kings have been awful for so long. So I definitely understand what you're saying. But again, if you're there at 12 and you have him there, I'd take him. But again, I love Aaron Nesmith, his ability to just shoot the hell out of that basketball, and his size, which a lot of people sleep on. I would take Neesmith over Bay, but that's just me. But I wouldn't be mad at either pick. I think they're both solid, and they both have size. So both guys would make sense. And then at 13, New Orleans would take Neesmith, which again makes perfect sense to add more shooting around Zion. Uh, do you agree or disagree with that one?
Yeah, I think there's definitely been a lot of trade rumors with Drew Holiday, literally just in the last 2 days.
Yeah.
I've heard rumors even Miami trying to get rid of, not get rid of, but trade away Tyler Hero for Drew Holiday. And so, yeah, I think Aaron Nesmith definitely does fit that team. You got Lonzo who is able to shoot threes in the regular season, but not in the bubble. So that's something to monitor. But yeah, for the Kings, I feel like if we don't see Buddy Hield being a long-term plan, then Aaron Nesmith is probably the way to go over Bay. But yeah, and it fit with the Pelicans. I feel like we're both kind of in the same boat with Pelicans
Yeah.
versus Pelicans Kings. About like young team trying to grow. And so yeah, I mean, always adding the shooter is great. And so yeah, especially if the Pelicans get rid of Drew Holiday, I mean, you can just plug them right in.
Um, Charlie says the Kings offense is a downgrade from Jay Wright basketball. Wow. Oh man, no lies detected. And then before we get to number 14, Edward says, should the Kings make some major moves in the draft or stay put? Dot. So actually, let's get to 14 and then we'll answer that question. So at 14, Jalen Smith going to the Boston Celtics, who they got to trade from the Memphis Grizzlies in that swap. Um, I'll answer first. I think this is the obvious pick from like the consensus in the sense that everybody knows that they need a big man. But if I'm them, I'm shopping that pick and trying to get an established big man, like a Drummond, like any of these bigger guys. So do I agree or disagree? I think it's pretty obvious that you just, pencil in whoever the best big man is available at that point. So I'm not going to disagree with that.
Yeah, I feel like I'm literally just going to agree with you 100%
Yeah.
here, especially where the Celtics are, definitely a playoff contending team. They need someone who can contribute now. If they want to go draft route, I also want to be opposed to, Precious Achua. I mean,
Yeah.
another guy that's, able to get rebounds and block shots, and that's really all they need. That's what they expected out of Robert Williams. He's kind of underperformed for them. But yeah, I would definitely prefer the Celtics to get a more established big, just like Andre Drummond.
Yeah. Achua there would make sense to me as well. And if I'm them, I'm doing this too. It's kind of is answering Edward's question. I'm calling the Kings and saying, bro, I need Rashawn Holmes. Rashawn Holmes is a missing piece to that squad. Rashawn Holmes is a missing piece to a lot of teams because he's so solid defensively. He's a great roller and he's a good rebounder. So if I'm them, I'd be like, I'll offer you 14 for him straight up, or whatever works in terms of financial stuff like salary cap. But if I'm them, and then the Kings would be like, oh my gosh, like, do I want to give him up? I know how good he is. He's an asset to me, but I'd get number 14. And then if you do trade Buddy Hield, right, for number 6, so you'd have 6, 12, and 14. I don't know, bro. Like, I I think about it, but I don't know. Like, what do you think?
So what the weird position we are in as Kings fans is like we like some of our guys, but at the same time we just still can't win, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like we do like a half-ass rebuild where we
Yeah.
want young guys, but at the same time we don't aren't willing to go completely rebuild, and so we're always stuck between like in terms of seeding like 10 to 12 range, and like that doesn't get the job done draft wise, and it doesn't get the job playoff contention wise, right? So I mean, having those picks in the first round of this year's draft, I feel like would just basically be saying, we're in a complete rebuild, and I'm not
Yeah.
opposed to that. But with Monty McNair, I hope that he's able to have that vision and have that for sure direction for us, whether we do want to completely rebuild and kind of get rid of Buddy Hield, Rashawn Holmes, or if we just want to go make a playoff run. But, we paid a lot of money to Harrison Barnes, and De'Aaron Fox's contract is coming up, so I don't know if he wants to see another rebuild before we pay him that max money. What are your thoughts on that, Leo?
So hypothetically, if it goes the way this thing is saying, at number 6, you would get your guy Isaac Okoro. At number 12, at that point, you go Neesmith, right? So you could
Yeah.
have Neesmith off the bench, and then at actually, if you get 12, and then you get 14, you could potentially get Kyra, Neesmith, and Okoro. Are you happy with that?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not opposed to that. I think
Yeah.
at that point, the only worry we have is we don't have a center anymore, right? We have Harry Giles, and that's it, right? So, I mean, you even mentioned it before. You saw the
Then you
Kings
go out and you sign Alex
touch
Len.
wood. Yeah, you just saw the Kings drop off after Rashawn Holmes' injury, right?
Yep.
Defensive wise. So, I mean, if Rashawn Holmes is able to maintain that defensive prowess that he was able to do before the injury, I mean, it was kind of difficult for him to come back during the bubble, so I don't blame him for that. But yeah, I mean, if we want to completely rebuild that and go with young guys, I'm not opposed to that opportunity.
Yeah. Someone said, Samuel says, Buddy does not have enough value to get you a top 10 pick. Now, I disagree only because the only team that would pull that trigger, I believe in my heart wholeheartedly, is that the Hawks would do it because they're in such an urgency to win now with Trae Young, and putting Buddy Hield with him, I think is a nice backcourt, super explosive. That they have enough bigs over there that can, in a sense, back those two guys who are defensive liabilities, like the Capellas of the world. So again, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if that deal's on the table, do you take it if you're the Kings? So that would mean re-signing Bogey Bogdanovic. So if there's a team, and I'm not disagreeing with you, who would give up their pick to get a very good player, because I mean, as much as the Buddy hate is real in Sacramento, you can't deny he's a good player, man. Like he's a really good basketball player. This is a guy that's put up 20 points in the NBA. Like that's not something that you can say, oh, anybody can do, because that's not true. So for a guy that's put up 20 pretty much twice, right, back-to-back years, even though people want to exaggerate over this year, like his stats are pretty much identical, um, that would be a team that would essentially give up number 6, and maybe the Kings may have to take a contract back just to make some of the salary cap work, but they could pretty much absorb most of his contract. So that's just a suggestion, or obviously we're speculating. That's part of the podcast. But to answer your question, I agree and disagree with the thing, because I feel like the Hawks would give it up, and then every other team probably wouldn't do it.
Yeah. I think it's just difficult because, especially with this past season, I think that
Right.
Buddy Hill's trade value kind of went down, especially, trying to be that playmaker for us and kind of being more inefficient. I do understand. I don't know who commented that about, a team not willing to give up a top 10 pick for Buddy Hield, considering, his trade stock has gone down. But I think something I just kind of want to entertain. You mentioned how, we might have to take a bad contract. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we might have a Dwayne Dedman reunion back in
Oh, hell
Sacramento,
no.
man.
Oh, don't say that, man.
Oh,
And
man.
again, he's a great human being. Like, love Deadman, but as a basketball player, I've never seen anybody so robotic in my life.
Yeah, I don't know.
Seriously, like I have never seen anybody so robotic in my life. This dude was a robot on the court. everything was methodical in the sense that it was slow and it was predictable, and I would not appreciate a reunion with them. He says, "How do you feel about drafting rookies in the lottery if you can't give them 10 to 14 shots a game?" Good question.
It depends on what system you're in, right? So if you aren't able to get a guy 10 to 14 shots a game, and if you're going, I feel like, in my opinion, late lottery isn't necessarily the same as lottery, in my opinion, right? The expectations aren't as high. And, sometimes there's a lot of like playoff contention teams that have had like trades where they're able to get late lottery, right? And so I'm not opposed to taking a guy late lottery if you are a team like the Celtics, right? There's no way that any rookie is going to get 10 to 14 shots behind Kemba Walker, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown. But as long as they're able to fit, I know we were mentioning earlier, Halliburton to the Warriors, right? There's no way he's going to get 10 or 14 shots a game, but he can
Mm-hmm.
contribute to that team immediately, right? So I think if you look at the system, especially with, playoff contention teams, whether, it's 8 to 10 range in terms of seeding, or, even a team that is in the playoffs, I'm not opposed to taking a rookie that can take 10 or 14 shots if they can contribute immediately. What do you think?
Yeah, you said it best. Just depend on the system. And again, I think it matters that you're drafting somebody top five rather than 12 and 14. Like, yeah, it's from a technicality standpoint, they are in the lottery. But again, you're pretty much drafting the good player at that point, a guy that's going to be a role player. So there isn't star implications. Edward says, if the Kings get back to who they should be, a running team, then Buddy should thrive, in my opinion. 1000% agree with that. DJP13 says Buddy in the 12 for 6 and Herder, in my opinion.
I don't love Herder. I mean, I just think he's kind of like a defensive liability when you have a
Yep.
shooter like that. I mean, you got to see it with Miami, right? They had a kind of like high Duncan Robinson on defense because this guy just kept getting exposed. Don't get me wrong, Duncan Robinson is a hell of a shooter, but at the
There's a
same time,
difference between Herder and Robinson, though. And there's a
yeah,
difference between Herder and Buddy. Like,
yes.
Robinson, Buddy, these are elite with the capital E shooters. Herder is a good shooter. He's not great.
Yeah, I think, yeah, for me also, I kind of just want to entertain this thought. When I first heard Alvin Gentry getting hired as an assistant coach, I was thinking like a potential replacement for Luke, and that could be our potential way to get back to the running team that we are. So, I mean, that's kind of an interesting thought to, perceive because Alvin Gentry is a head coach capable talent in the NBA. So, I mean, if Luke Walton starts off this NBA season not doing so well, I wouldn't be surprised to make that switch immediately, especially having a guy that's already in the system.
I disagree with that only in the sense that I believe both Luke and Alvin are great head assistant coaches, and that's the problem that they have two of those guys and not a real head coach that can have real success. Now, if you would ask me who has the most upside, which is a weird question for a coach, but to me, it's Luke Walton. And so they have the right guy as a head coach right now, but I wouldn't want either guy as my head coach if I was running the team. Now, that's not a disrespect to Luke. Can he get there? Yes. Will he get there? Who knows? I hope so. Tyson says the Kings need to win now just as bad, if not more, than the Hawks. Agree or disagree with that?
I mean, as much as we look at our roster, we've talked about it previously, where our money is going to be tied up to De'Aaron Fox, Buddy Hield, Bogey, and Bagley. Bagley's, he was drafted in 2018, right? So his contract is coming up very soon as well. You look at it and you go, is this a team that's going to be able to contend in the West? I mean, what's our ceiling realistically? Because it's going to be a lower seed, 6 to 8, if these guys are able to meet their potential that they're supposed to be at. I think when you look at Atlanta, a proven all-star in Trae Young, John Collins, which is a superstar, I see what they're saying in terms of we were both in the same position a couple years ago, but the Atlanta organization has been able to progress a lot more than us. So although I would love to say as a Kings fan, we need to win now, I wouldn't be opposed to, just like you mentioned earlier, having 3 first-round picks and kind of resetting this thing into a point where our cap space situation is a little bit more open, right? And so we have more opportunities in that way. I mean, if we had been able to excel the way that we did after that Jaeger season, right, and almost making the playoffs and continue to improve, that'd be different. But it seems like we took a big step back this season, and so, I mean, to basically answer the question, I don't think we are in as much of a win now situation as Atlanta.
I'm gonna have to disagree with you again, and this may be a hot take or not very popular around national consensus, but I think Darren Fox is a better player than Trey Young, and because of that, I feel like the Kings should urge and put a team that's win now mentality. So I agree with Tyson, but will they go in that direction is a separate conversation, and I'm gonna guess that probably not. Like I feel like they're more closer to saying, okay, let's rebuild to some degree, maybe tweak some things. But the Kings should be in a win now situation. But it's so complicated because Bagley hasn't developed the way he should have. Now, can Bagley be that guy this upcoming season? Sure, he can. But can he stay healthy? Is the real question. So it's tough, man. I don't know what Monte will do, but if he does trade Buddy Hield, it's gonna have to be on draft night because that's where you could potentially get the most value out of him. And I know Charlie said uh, something about I think he took down his. Oh no. It was actually from Samuel. He said the Kings should target Desmond Bain if they trade Buddy, which again, guy who's a senior, who's I don't know, 22, 23 years old. He's ready to rock and roll. He's strong. He's physically ready for the NBA. He'd come in and he'd contribute to your team. Those are the guys that I'm referring to that are ready to play now and may not have the most upside, but if they're good basketball players now, I don't really care.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so in my opinion, should they win now? Yes, and as a Kings fan, you want that, but will they go in that direction? My gut says no, and I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, I feel like we should be win now, and so I think a good team comparison for us, I think we should have been Phoenix this year, where we
Yeah,
show up in the bubble, win all these games, even if it's eighth seed against the Lakers. You know, what I mean, that's a huge step for Sacramento, right? And I think De'Aaron Fox and Marvin Bagley were supposed to emulate, a Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton type thing, right? Where you have,
yeah,
your guard and your big, and they get the job done. And so when you look at that Phoenix Sun roster on paper, they're not that great. Kelly Oubre and then like what Javon Carter, you know what I mean? At the same time, I feel like the Kings have better role players than that, and we should have been able to perform better. But at the end of the day, because we didn't perform as well, I feel like the Suns could. You can even argue the Suns are in a more win now situation than the Kings just based off of last season. That was a very promising bubble for them, and so that's why for me, as much as you said we should be win now, I wish we could be win now. We're just not in that position.
Now, real quick, as promising as that was for the Suns, do you think it has something to do with those teams that they beat saying, we're in the playoffs already, we're not going to play as hard? Or does it have to do more with the Suns winning those games?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? And so I think if you definitely saw them during the season, right, there's a reason why they went undefeated and still didn't make the bubble because they didn't have that great of a record. But
Right.
I think when you look at that franchise as a whole, especially with Monty Williams, we talked about this before, Ricky Rubio, right? Who did they draft last year? Who was their rookie?
Yeah, the guard that shoots nice. That reminds me of Neesmith.
Yeah, but yeah, ultimately, when you kind of like you see a direction for Phoenix, right? When you look at and then I hate to say it, but like Buddy Hield technically isn't that young nucleus for us,
Yeah.
right? He's a little bit older, and so yeah, it's just for them we can see a direction, but for Sacramento, I don't know if we really see a direction on where we're going in terms of playoff contention.
Someone says, who would you pair well with Fox in free agency?
Man, this offseason, I don't know if there's really going to be much available. I
Yeah.
mean,
Not in free agency. That would pretty much be via trade. You have guys like Victor Oladipo, like Gordon Hayward. Those are guys, again, that I would go after if you're in the win now situation because you're not going to sign anybody, convince anybody to come to the Kings. So you have to do it via trade. And now you have to ask yourself, okay, are these teams willing to take in some of these guys that we have? So that's how you get better if you're in a win now mentality. And I hope they are. We'll find out very soon. November 18th
Would,
is what, 12 days away? So we'll
would you be
see.
willing to give up Buddy Hield in the 12th for Oladipo?
No, I would be willing to give up Buddy for Oladipo
Yeah,
because at the
I
end of the
think
day, they have to get something in return for him because he's leaving.
Yeah. I think Victor Oladipo is surprisingly a good fit for Sacramento because he's a
He's a
player
great
that can
fit.
score and is technically has been in that superstar all-star conversation. And I think a place like Sacramento where he has a lot of opportunity and especially playing alongside De'Aaron Fox who can really get him a lot of shots, right? So that all the attention is not on Victor Oladipo. I could see it being a good fit in Sacramento. So
No, I think he's a great fit defensively, both him and Fox. If they can stay healthy, is the big if. It's not whether or not they'll make the playoffs because if those two guys stay healthy and if Oladipo ever reaches 95% of the All NBA year he had, they're making the playoffs. But
yeah.
that's a big if because you would have three guys in Fox, Depot, and Bagley who are known to be injury prone. And to some degree, Fox, I have more faith in Fox out of all three guys. It's just unfortunate what happened to him in practice, which is what held
Yeah.
him back from being what he was that last month of the year, which was 23 and 9 or 23 and 8, which is what I had him from the very get go, and which is what I believe he would have had. So it's unfair to say he's injury prone because we've seen him play a lot of games the second year, and yeah, it's tough, man, and he's just so talented, and I just think if he can just develop that shot and be more consistent with it, the NBA is his, man. Like his talent in transition, his ability to take it to the rack and still not get calls and still go to the line 6, 7 times is big time, and I just see such a bright future, bro. Like if it just clicks for him mentally where he's like I have to be in this Russell Westbrook mode all game, then he could easily be a top 10 player, like easily. But the thing is, everybody can't have it on turned on like that for 4 quarters. So that's something that we just have to really watch for.
Yeah, definitely, man. It's just so difficult as a Kings fan, right? Because I've said it a million times, on paper we should be, a playoff contending team, but we should be 8-7 somewhere around there. And so when I look at it kind of like just like I said, in terms of team comparison, in terms of Phoenix and how they've been able to win in the bubble, and so that shows a promising future. Atlanta, right, with Trey Young and John Collins, that's a promising future. That should have been De'Aaron Fox and Marvin Bagley. But what I see a lot of similarity with us is Washington a few years ago, right? When they had John Wall, Brad Beal, Otto
Yeah,
Porter. And so I feel like that's what the Kings should have been in terms of a playoff contention team. John Wall should have been De'Aaron Fox. Bradley Beal should have been Buddy Hield. Otto Porter should have been, I mean, technically he's younger, but like Harrison Barnes, right? Filled the
right.
same role at least. And so we just haven't been able to get that. We've kind of created a team that should have been able to do that. But I mean, as a Kings fan, it's very frustrating and very complicated. But regardless of what you see on paper, our performance hasn't been there. So hopefully we can see what we do in this draft, and hopefully we can make a playoff push this season.
1000%, man. I think that's a good way to end this show. Thank you guys so much for all the support. Make sure you like this video or dislike it. Let us know how you feel about it. Also, make sure you drop a review or rating on iTunes. It helps us out a lot. I think we're almost at 100 reviews already, so we appreciate that. And thank you, brother, for coming on. This is always fun. I think we've been consistent every single week. Yesterday because it was election day, but typically we do the shows on Tuesdays. I'll say this. I'll preface my week coming up. We won't have a pre-recorded podcast at noon like we usually do on a Friday because I'm heading to Arizona for a client shoot. We're working on a documentary about. You know what? I'm gonna save it, and because I don't want to spill it, but it's a big project. It's a big project. So no podcast this Friday at noon. I'll be in Arizona from Thursday to Monday. Hopefully by Tuesday we do another show with Ty, And that's pretty much how we're gonna do it, man. So if you guys, I feel like we covered a lot of bases, and maybe you'll get updates from me sporadically on Basketball Zone and on Cowboy Kingdom, from Thursday to Monday. But in terms of another show, it probably won't be until next Tuesday, and get back to our schedule, man. So, anything else that you'd like to add?
No, man, I'm having a lot of fun doing this. I appreciate Leo for giving me this opportunity, and yeah, I'm just looking forward to talking more basketball. And I really appreciated you guys have commenting, giving us stuff to talk about. I think it's really cool that we're able to interact with you guys, and yeah, comment more.
Absolutely, man. And next Tuesday, we'll probably open up the lines for you guys, not just the comment box, but on behalf of the entire CK family, Basketball Zone family, we'll see you guys on the next one.